The story opens on a battlefield, where two protagonists stand amid chaos. One of them has a destroyed wing, and he blames himself. He cannot believe that the other would dare think he could harm him, and he refuses to let such a thought continue. Then the scene shifts to the past. In a grand hall filled with murmurs and whispers, a female protagonist demands clarification. She asks what he means and urges His Highness Crawford to explain. King Crawford calmly responds that she heard him correctly, and he stands by his words. He cannot bear the thought of marrying a low-born, useless noblewoman from the frontier. Not only that, he declares he has fallen in love with someone else. He turns to Florelia de Naesner and announces that their engagement is annulled. Florelia is stunned. Crawford then introduces the woman he calls his one and only love, Monica de Marlin. Monica politely greets Lady Florelia and mentions she thought Florelia was the third daughter of Countess Margit. Florelia replies that it has indeed been a while. Monica notes that it seems she has taken Florelia's place as the Crown Prince's fiancée. Monica continues, explaining that while Lady Florelia was away, the prince appeared terribly lonely. Florelia admits to herself that she had indeed been gone in Naesner territory for about a year, but wonders if His Highness truly felt lonely. Monica expresses that she simply could not bear seeing him suffer like that. She claims she only intended to ease his loneliness, not steal Florelia's place. It just ended up happening that way, and this is how things have turned out. Whispers ripple across the hall. Florelia reflects that their engagement had been formed for clear political reasons. The crowd reacts. Someone questions whether Florelia has lost her senses, and another asks why she is letting the prince do this. Monica apologizes in advance, insisting that marriage should be about mutual feelings. Crawford agrees, saying his heart belongs to Monica. Monica echoes the sentiment. A woman in the crowd mutters that she hopes they do not embarrass themselves. The king grows irritated. Monica remarks that she tried to advise Florelia, yet Florelia makes no attempt to win His Highness back. After all, Monica insists she and the prince love one another. Florelia accepts the statement. Crawford then announces they already have her father's approval to dissolve the engagement. He instructs her to leave. He adds coldly that she was merely a worthless nobody from the edge of civilization before turning and walking away. The hall erupts in anxious chatter. A young man voices disbelief, questioning whether the prince has gone mad, insulting the daughter of Count Naesner. He points out that their family is the nation's shield and sword, and that Florelia has spent a year on the battlefield fighting demons. Then, Count Gustav de Naesner appears, a man known as the Count of the Ice Frontier and Florelia's father. He states that he heard the prince and agrees to the annulment. Florelia is shocked. Gustav remarks that even the Silver Saint will find this interesting, wondering whether this was all done on a whim. Night falls and Florelia and Gustav sit inside their carriage. Gustav says it is safe to speak, and Florelia smiles, surprised at how convincingly he played his part. Yet something troubles her, and she asks if they may discuss the events of the day. Gustav allows it. Florelia questions his perspective on everything that happened. At the same time, she reflects inwardly. Their world is home to both humans and demons. Under the guidance of their creator, the goddess Teleris, worshipped by the people of the kingdom of Fozik, those born to the Naesner bloodline are granted unique talents. The Naesner family was known as the Guardians of the West, protectors of the kingdom against the constant threat of demon invasion. Naturally, a lineage like theirs carried immense privilege and influence. So for the crown prince to dismiss Florelia as useless meant he was willing to cast aside the kingdom's sword and its only shield. Florelia quietly acknowledged that she held no romantic feelings for the prince. Their engagement had always been political. Still, she had assumed His Highness would understand the consequences of such a reckless act. The situation felt almost like something ripped from a poorly written Believer novel. Gustav, however, disagreed. To him, the prince's declaration of love rang hollow. Despite claiming deep affection, there was not a trace of true emotion in him. Florelia considered that if her assumptions were correct, then there had to be another motive behind dissolving their engagement. She began to question which faction would benefit from such a development. She recalled noticing suspicious movements during the soirée earlier. In her mind, the Marquis of Trefusos, the Count of Tarpor, and Baron Oppas stood out as possible masterminds behind this. Gustav assured her he would begin investigating immediately. Taking her hand, he gently expressed concern, wondering if she was pushing herself too hard. After all, despite the prince's behavior, he had supported her since their engagement. It must have hurt her deeply. Florelia brushed it off. She claimed it did not affect her much, although she admitted that being called a useless family from the edge of the frontier did anger her. Regardless, she understood that the political landscape could shift rapidly and preparations were necessary. Gustav agreed. Florelia felt that a thorough investigation was essential. Whatever happened next, they had to be ready. After a long journey, they finally arrived at their castle, a grand and imposing structure. Exhausted, Florelia returned to her room and drifted into sleep. However, in the quiet of the night, she faintly heard voices, a sense of trouble echoing around her. At first, she believed it must be a dream. When she woke, she questioned the noise she heard. It didn't feel like imagination. It was as if something was calling to her. She dismissed it, thinking she must be fatigued after everything that had happened, even feeling stiffness in her body. Then suddenly, a gentle voice reached her, calling her beloved child, Flora, one of them. Before she could make sense of it, her door burst open. A girl rushed in, reassuring her that everything would be all right. Florelia felt relief wash over her. It was Maria. Maria burst into the room and wasted no time. She made it clear that Florelia had nothing to blame herself for. If Florelia even entertained that thought for a moment, Maria vowed she would never forgive her. Anger simmered in Maria's voice as she could not fathom that the prince had ended the engagement for the woman he called his one true love. The prince, Maria insisted, had lost his mind. To ditch Florelia for that woman was an outrage. Then Maria spoke with fierce admiration, painting Florelia in exalted terms, her long silver hair that gleamed like moonlight, her blue eyes as clear as molten crystal, a face that might belong to a goddess, and an inner strength rivaling the fiercest monsters. To Maria, the prince had committed an unthinkable blunder, a mistake that would be remembered for generations. He had chosen a lowborn thief over Florelia, the obvious choice for the kingdom's future empress. How could he be so blind, Maria wondered, and she even checked whether Florelia was paying attention. Florelia listened, amused and quietly pleased as she ate. She invited Maria to sit and try the family's traditional sweets, yoken and green tea. Maria sighed but agreed to take some. When they turned back to the matter at hand, Florelia admitted she was not truly frightened by the broken engagement. Scandals and shifting romances were hardly new to the royal family. Looking at history, she was surprised it had taken this long to happen. Still, being called a useless family from the frontier was an insult she could not forgive. She vowed she would make the prince regret those words and even swore she would slap him 30 times if she ever saw him again. Maria reacted incredulously, asking if Florelia could be serious. Maria then cautioned that annulling an engagement in such a manner might invoke the wrath of the spirits. Marriage, after all, was traditionally a ceremony blessed by the spirits and recorded in history. From a practical standpoint, Florelia's rare restorative magic made the prince's treatment of her appear not merely foolish but reckless. Maria suspected there might be more behind the abrupt break, perhaps a clumsy conspiracy among the nobles. Florelia asked if that was what Maria believed. Maria agreed, noting that Monica's sudden rise in closeness to the prince felt suspicious. Rumors about Monica's advances toward the prince had only surfaced in the past few months, and since Monica had begun frequenting the prince's side, His Highness had seemed unusually despondent whenever she was absent. Later that night, Gustav arrived with alarming news from the frontier. He reported that a massive black cloud of miasma had formed near the western mountains just beyond the border. Florelia cut him off, saying this was no moment for apologies. They had to move immediately. Without delay, they mounted their horses and rode out. Florelia reflected on the timing. It had been less than 4 months since the previous battle, and the pace felt unnervingly fast. Gustav acknowledged her concern and, consulting the records, conceded that if past patterns held true, they should have expected several years of calm, roughly 4 years, before another major attack. His assessment suggested the situation could not be handled with old assumptions. Perhaps unconventional measures would be necessary to meet this new threat. Florelia checked on him, asking if he was sure he was all right and whether he felt any numbness like before. The miasma should have dissipated at least a month before appearing again, yet this one behaved differently, far more violent and lingering for almost half a year. Even though her own afflictions had passed, any remaining demon had to be eliminated. That alone was difficult enough, and the battlefield conditions didn't make it any easier. Suddenly, a sharp cracking noise echoed from within the miasma. Florelia tensed, believing she recognized the sound. Then she heard someone calling her name, her brother. Haltov den Aesner appeared before her, delighted to see her after so long. He remarked on how she had grown even cuter and mentioned hearing about the prince breaking the engagement. She didn't need to worry, he said. He would deal with that brat himself. Florelia quickly asked him to explain what was happening. Haltov apologized for summoning her to the front so soon and pointed to the swirling cloud ahead. It was enormous, far too large for his platoon to handle alone. A normal cloud like this should have been manageable, but one of this magnitude was abnormal and dangerously beyond their capacity. Florelia agreed. This was not good. It was even larger than the last outbreak. Halto suggested calling for reinforcements from the Countess of Sistina, and then the battlefield erupted. War broke out and screams filled the air. Soldiers collapsed from their wounds. One man cried in agony, refusing to die in such a place. A soldier tried to rescue another despite suffering severe injuries himself, but he lacked the strength. He simply couldn't save him. A sudden surge of magic answered their despair. Florelia descended like a radiant force, casting a vast restoration spell. Light scattered, shimmering across the field. Wounded soldiers gasped as their bodies mended, pain fading, limbs returning, life surging back. One man expressed heartfelt gratitude to Lady Florelia, recognizing her as the Silver Saint. She assured him it was all right, but explained she needed to continue moving. Another soldier stared at his restored arm in disbelief, calling it a miracle. A young boy in a cloak spoke in awe, remarking that her abilities surpassed anything they had ever seen. Recovery magic was rare. Even novices capable of light-level healing could live comfortably. Those able to perform intermediate middle-grade healing or create potions were valued by nobles, but Florelia could wield legendary, high-level magic with ease, the reason she had earned the exalted title of the Silver Saint. Footsteps approached. Maria emerged, confirming she had located her. She announced that, in response to her father's message, the Countess of Sistina had sent reinforcements. Still, judging from the battlefield, the situation was grim. Florelia noted that they had suffered countless injuries in just a few days. The battle had gone on for 3 weeks, yet the demon showed no sign of weakening. Maria, however, wasn't only referring to the battlefield. She pointed out that she was talking about Florelia's condition as well. Was she truly all right? It wasn't unreasonable to ask. The faint wrinkles beneath Florelia's eyes made it clear she hadn't been taking care of herself. Maria could hardly believe Florelia had been continuously using high-grade recovery magic without rest. Florelia explained that there weren't many healing mages available. Most could only cast intermediate-level spells, so she had to shoulder the majority of the work. Maria grew frustrated. Did Florelia realize how much magic she was exhausting? She was pushing herself to death. At this rate, she would collapse, or worse. Florelia insisted she had been taking naps. Maria immediately recognized the lie. Florelia reasoned that without her large-scale restoration magic, the front lines would have already fallen. Maria refused to accept it. She grabbed Florelia's hand and declared that it was already 1 in the morning. Florelia needed rest. She knew better than anyone that once Florelia started working, there was no stopping her. Still fuming, Maria announced they were leaving for now. Thankfully, she had brought her trusty stuffed sheep. All Florelia had to do was squeeze the fluffy little friend, and her exhaustion would fade. Florelia thanked her sincerely. But despite their effort to pull away and rest, one last injured figure remained alone on the battlefield. In ancient tales, it was said that the star goddess once had a brother named Gaius. His emotions were unstable, and he would frequently lose control of his powers. Because of his chaotic nature, the goddess had no choice but to restrain him. As a result of her decision, Gaius was banished from the world. From that moment, he resented his sister for not accepting him. Over time, his emotions faded away, and he became nothing more than an empty shell of his former self. Meanwhile, Florelia wandered through what looked like an unknown place, wondering where she was. She noticed someone wounded and assumed it had to be a dream. She believed it was a ridiculous one and thought she must have been exhausted. She returned to sleep, until she suddenly heard a voice telling her not to sleep. Shocked, she wondered if something was in her room. She woke up screaming, asking who was there. A small cat jumped onto her as if to confirm she was awake. Florelia was captivated by the sight of the cat. They exchanged a good morning greeting, and the cat pawed at her while she asked it to stop. Florelia felt the urge to touch it and began to tickle it, wondering if it was truly real. The cat urged her to follow. Florelia thought she must still be dreaming but went along anyway, noticing that no one around could see them. The cat confirmed that others could not see them, but Florelia could see and hear the cat clearly. Florelia asked what the cat was. The cat replied that she was simply a cat, though she did not yet have a name. She was pleased Florelia followed and shyly asked if Florelia could give her a name. Florelia suggested Calico, believing it suited her. Calico was delighted to finally have a name and expressed her joy. Florelia asked her to calm down, happy that she liked it. Calico excitedly said she was grateful Miss Flora had named her and reminded her that they would soon need to report to the king. Florelia wondered if spirits had a king. Calico clarified that he was the king of the spirit world, very big and extremely strong. Florelia was amazed and questioned if spirits were truly real. Calico explained that there were many different types of spirits. Florelia asked if that meant different species. Calico sighed in relief that the place was still open. Florelia wondered if it was her father's office. Calico said they were about to hear a story and should listen carefully. Florelia heard that someone wanted to talk about her. Florelia focused as she realized her father and brother were present. Gustav instructed that they should begin. Halto marveled at a crystal ball. Gustav explained that the crystal ball contained a message from the first head of their family. A voice emerged from the crystal ball, asking if it was recording. He introduced himself as Ishard and confirmed that yes, it was indeed being recorded. Halto introduced himself as Halto de Niesner, and Ishard stated he would get straight to the point, urging them to listen. He said that if they were hearing this, then roughly 300 years must have passed since the demons were defeated. Florelia realized that was Halto. Ishard asked them to let him understand their situation and reminded them of the strong gathering of miasma in the western mountains. He explained that it was connected to what happened at Fort Garud. While he could not be certain what would follow, he believed the cause was linked to that event. Halto admitted that Ishard was likely correct. Ishard then asked them to allow him to teach them how to survive the coming crisis and encourage them to stay strong, assuring them they would manage. He explained that near Fort Garud, within the mountain range, there should be a cave. Inside that cave were scriptures left behind by a legendary dragon. Halto wondered about the mention of a cave. He questioned whether Ishard was sure, since he did not remember any cave in that area. Ishard continued, explaining that he believed he could revive the dragon using an extremely powerful restoration spell. The revived dragon, he claimed, would clear the miasma in the west and destroy any obstacles in its way. With that, he wished them good luck. Halto struggled to believe that Ishard was serious. Gustav responded that the first head of their family had been regarded as the greatest mage in history. Although he admitted that the man was eccentric, he had no doubt about his wisdom. Meanwhile, Calico informed Florelia that the group was discussing the King of Spirits. She explained that spirits had been forgotten over time, despite once living alongside humans. But now, they faced a looming crisis. Scouts had reported that another force of demons had been spotted, set to invade tomorrow. The estimate was around 2,000 demons, though the number could be even higher. Halto felt it had to be a joke. There were only about 1,000 defenders available. Gustav secured the crystal ball and said that he had already requested reinforcements from His Majesty, but Marcus Terfusos was the one in charge there, and he would oppose the request entirely. Halto noted that the Marquis had always been hostile toward them, and complained about the man's messy hair. He suspected the Marquis had something to do with sabotaging Flora's engagement. Gustav acknowledged that it was possible, even if Florelia believed no foul play had occurred. Gustav pointed out that they could not openly oppose the family of the future queen. However, after investigating, he learned that the prince's new fiancée was related to Marquis Terfusos. To Gustav, the plan was obvious. Halto questioned how much influence the Marquis held over the royal family. It felt as though they were trying to destroy their family and seize their land. Either way, the situation was dire. Florelia realized this was the true reason behind everything. Halto finally understood the situation clearly. He stated that a horde of demons stood before them, while an army disguised as allies stood behind them. It would be a life-or-death scenario. At least they had the ancestral information, he said, and knowing that dragons truly existed, and that only their lineage could access such power, was a reassurance. However, he added coldly that if Gustav even considered sacrificing Florelia, he would kill him without hesitation. The room froze. Gustav, shocked, asked if Halto truly believed he would sacrifice his own beloved daughter. Halto realized for a moment that he might have gone too far. Gustav then declared that their first goal was to stop the demon horde. Even at the cost of his own life, he would ensure Florelia's safety. Florelia, overwhelmed, ran away in tears. She understood that her father had already made up his mind, but she also believed that if their ancestor, known as the greatest mage in history, had left a warning, it would be foolish to ignore it. In her room, she changed into battle attire, thinking that even if destroying the horde meant she would be consumed by the spell, she could not let the opportunity pass. She whispered an apology to her father, vowing that if she could save his life, she would not sit still and allow him to sacrifice himself for her. Remembering the cave near Fort Garud, she stepped out and quietly left the estate. Florelia made her way through the vast forest, thinking about how large it was and believing she was heading in the right direction. Suddenly, she heard a voice teasing that Flora was sneaking out and calling it villainous. The voice came from a tree's bushes. Recognizing it, Floralia realized it was familiar. Moments later, Maria emerged from the foliage. Maria exclaimed dramatically that she thought Flora was doing well, then demanded she confess. Floralia asked what Maria was doing there. Maria explained that her Flora sensors had been screaming that Floralia was planning something suspicious. Floralia already knew that Maria came from a family skilled in information trading, but even then, those instincts of hers were terrifying at times. Maria shared that she had a strange dream earlier. A mysterious fox appeared and told her that Floralia was going to perform an important ritual, asking her to accompany her. So she came. She admitted being skeptical at first, but it seemed the dream was true. She didn't actually believe Floralia would be sneaking out to do what the fox described, but the whole situation felt like a bad omen. Floralia wondered about foxes and whether it was another spirit like Calico. Maria blew a whistle and summoned her horse, proudly saying she was calling it. Then she invited Floralia to ride with her, directing her to hop on. They rode together through the large and dense forest. On the way, Maria asked Floralia to be honest. What exactly was her role in all this? Floralia couldn't admit she planned to sacrifice herself. Instead, she explained that she had been tasked with awakening the Spirit King who was sleeping in a cave deep in the forest. That was all. Maria remarked that she thought things like that only existed in old storybooks, but the fox in her dream looked just like the ones shown in the stained glass windows at their chapel. Perhaps spirits really did exist, she said. Floralia agreed that maybe they did, hidden away from human sight. Then she spotted a fox and told Maria to turn right. She saw what looked like a cave. Floralia apologized for causing Maria trouble, but it seemed this really was the place. She felt sure the Spirit King rested here. She thanked Maria, saying it meant everything to her. From this point on, she would go alone. She asked Maria to return to the fort and wait for her. Maria urged her to wait. She reminded Floralia that awakening the King of Spirits sounded extremely dangerous. Floralia assured her she would be fine. Maria asked again, and Floralia promised. Maria complained jokingly that if Floralia went alone, she would miss out on all the treasure inside. Floralia insisted she wasn't there for treasure. Maria dramatically accused her of trying to secure treasure alone and cheat her out of her share. She said she wouldn't allow that. Floralia, confused, questioned why she would do such a thing. Maria sighed and said she knew Floralia better than anyone. Her stubbornness would get her in trouble eventually, but she would overlook it this time. She still wanted her share of the prize. She then reminded Floralia of how, like a beautiful princess, she only thought of her safety. Even when far apart, their hearts were connected, and they would always reunite no matter the danger. The two embraced tightly. Maria wished for Floralia's safety. Floralia thanked her for believing in her and promised she would return. Floralia continued forward, but when she glanced back, she saw Maria sprinting toward her, having fallen right into her trap. She should have known Maria would never let her leave so easily, especially when treasure might be involved. Whether Floralia liked it or not, Maria planned to follow her. Just as Maria approached, she suddenly hit an invisible barrier and fell to the ground. She asked in frustration why this was happening to her. She wondered how Floralia managed to pass through when she could not. Floralia admitted she did not know either, but it seemed she truly had to go alone. Maria complained that it was terribly unfair. Floralia felt deeply grateful that Maria had chased after her. Maria returned to her horse, saying she would head back and prepare a feast for Floralia's return, but warned that if Floralia failed to come back, she would never forgive her. Floralia understood and promised to return. Maria responded that she expected to talk again when Floralia came back safely. By then, she said, the King of Spirits would already have dealt with the miasma. Meanwhile, back in town, two townsfolk spoke quietly. One mentioned that there had been an increase in vagrants recently, and the market had not been receiving proper shipments. Prices had been steadily rising, and miasma had been spreading uncontrollably. Demons had begun attacking entire farms. The other person asked whether the demons were dealt with quickly, and wondered if all this chaos was connected to recent events, particularly the Crown Prince annulling his engagement with the Silver Saint. The first man replied that it had been a terrible decision and felt sorry for her. Elsewhere in the forest, Floralia entered the cave, observing what the inside looked like. A raccoon appeared before her, surprising her with how suddenly he showed up. He waved at her. Floralia immediately realized he was no normal raccoon. Ordinary animals didn't talk. When he asked if she was the one he had been waiting for, Floralia reacted with disbelief that he could speak. She questioned why she was even surprised anymore and asked if he was a spirit and what he was doing there. The raccoon confirmed he was a spirit and had been waiting for her. He asked her to open the door. Floralia looked around, confused, as she saw no handle, yet the door opened on its own. The raccoon explained that the door had been created by a man named Halto. Florelia realized Halto had even been here before. They descended a spiral staircase. Florelia asked if the Spirit King was below. The raccoon confirmed and told her to watch her step or the fall would hurt badly. Before she could reply, the raccoon himself slipped and fell. Florelia searched for him but could not find him anywhere. She wondered where he had gone. Then she realized she had seen this place before. It looked exactly like the place the Spirit King had shown her in her dream. She walked deeper, marveling at its beauty, but then she froze. Before her lay a massive dragon, injured and motionless. She stood in shock. The dragon was enormous. Then, inside the cave, Flora believed it was a terrible wound, one that could only come from a brutal battle. When he awakened, she thought she would be sacrificed. Even so, she felt she had to do this. Flora cast her wide area restoration spell. She poured every ounce of strength she had into awakening the dragon, silently pleading for this to work and save everyone. In her mind, she accepted that this was how she might die, sacrificed. None of it made sense, yet she continued. Meanwhile, back at the castle, Halto searched everywhere for Flora. Where had she gone? He couldn't find her anywhere. He reminded himself to stay calm. This was not the time to panic. Soon he spotted a horse in the forest. It was Maria. Even she was shocked to see Master freeze. She had been chased by slimes and begged for help. The slimes came from the miasma. Halto fought them off and demanded to know why she was out alone so late. Maria explained that she had taken Flora to the cave in the woods, but became worried and turned back, ending up here. Halto froze. He knew it. He cursed, realizing he had to rescue Flora. When Maria asked what he meant, he told her Flora intended to sacrifice herself to the dragon. Maria was stunned, unable to understand why. Halto finished off the slimes, feeling how tough they were. He hadn't realized the miasma had spread this far. Maria apologized for being unable to help. Halto reassured her before announcing he was heading for the cave. He ordered her to return and inform his father. He had to leave immediately. Suddenly, a crashing boom echoed with fierce winds. They turned and saw a massive dragon overhead, and Flora was riding it. Flora pointed out the miasma, noting how enormous it had become. The dragon declared that the mountain itself was the source of the miasma. It was too late to restore it to its natural state. Yet with this power, there was no longer anything to fear. A blazing fireball gathered in his grasp. Earlier, when the dragon awakened, he had been stunned to see a human girl. He questioned whether she healed him and whether she sought something in return. Flora confirmed it. The dragon remarked that his body felt significantly better, though some pain lingered in his neck. He owed her thanks. She had saved him from death's door. Yet he scolded her recklessness, noting he could sense she had nearly drained all her power. Flora insisted she needed to see him. The dragon mused that a human child wanted to stand before him. Very well, he would listen. That was when Flora asked the Great Spirit King to eat her. The king was baffled. Why would he do that? Flora explained she had been told she needed to sacrifice herself to the great dragon to protect everyone from the miasma, which had spiraled out of control. The dragon corrected her. He was a spirit king, and he did not devour humans. Where had she heard such disturbing nonsense? Flora answered that her ancestors had said so. The man was named Halto de Niesner. The spirit king asked if she knew him, and Flora replied she did, to some extent. Flora repeated that Halto said he had to eat her, but now the king claimed he would not eat anyone. What was she supposed to do? She felt completely confused. The king, amused and relieved, realized he had been saved by a truly fascinating girl. Besides, he sensed no fear in her eyes when she looked at him, and he liked that. The spirit king then declared that, in accordance with his pact with the goddess, he would protect her from all evil and remain by her side until the end. Flora was stunned. He went on, saying that from now on, the only being who could eat her was him. Since she wished for his help with the calamity, he would fulfill that wish. Now he had better go deal with it. The daughter of humans. Flora yelled that her name was Flora. Flora de Niesner, not daughter of humans. The dragon acknowledged it and said he would call her Flora. She truly was an interesting girl. He introduced himself as Lycurgus, the dragon of the stars. It would be a little bumpy, he warned, so she should hold on tight and not fall. Meanwhile, something like this was nothing to him. Flora demanded to know what he was doing. Lycurgus unleashed an enormous fireball onto the miasma, wiping it out completely. Flora questioned whether he really needed to do it in such a manner. He casually agreed that he did. Meanwhile, in the crown prince's palace, Monica ordered someone to bring her another and to hurry. The maid agreed. Monica insulted her, calling her useless and demanding she move faster. A cloaked man then mentioned that His Highness was extremely busy and suggested she return home. Monica snapped, questioning who he thought he was speaking to. She reminded him she was the official crown princess. The man acknowledged it and apologized, but stated he was correct. There were times when His Highness was simply unavailable. Monica went on, saying he must be the one her uncle spoke of, the man who would kill all the demons. While he was at it, she suggested he kill that lowly country girl too. It would be best to remove such obstacles early, so nothing could stand between her and the crown prince. She stated she wouldn't want that girl becoming jealous of their relationship. It was better to cut the rose before it grew thorns. In her view, what His Highness said, along with her uncle and even the king, was merely a trivial matter. After the dragon destroyed the miasma, word spread quickly. The miasma had vanished, along with the entire western mountain range. The monsters disappeared at the same time. Gustav was stunned, wondering what on earth had happened. Suddenly, Halto came running. Gustav questioned what happened to him, but Halto insisted something far more urgent was at hand. He revealed it was about Flora. Meanwhile, high above the battlefield, Flora watched the scene and marveled at the overwhelming power. The entire western mountain range had vanished without a trace. Lyburgus explained that with contamination that severe, there had been no choice but to obliterate the entire mountain. With that, neither the monsters nor the miasma would ever return. Flora thanked him, yet her expression carried sadness. Lyburgus noticed and asked if something was troubling her. Flora admitted she had a feeling her father was furious with her. She had snuck out without telling anyone, unable to say she planned to offer herself as a sacrifice. Lyburgus wondered why everyone seemed to share the same misunderstanding. She looked even more frightened now than when she first faced him. The scene shifted to the castle. Flora imagined how shocked and wary everyone must be. Under such circumstances, she reasoned, it couldn't be helped. She then asked Lyburgus if he could try appearing a little friendlier. Otherwise, someone might mistake him for a monster and attack. Lyburgus agreed that she had a point, and then asked if this would do. A sudden burst of magic sent Flora flying into the air. She panicked, confused and flustered, before landing safely in the arms of a long-haired man. Flora immediately recognized him as Lyburgus. He told her that simply calling him Libel was fine. Flora was astonished that he could change forms so easily. He truly felt like a spirit king. Libel wondered what exactly she found so impressive. Either way, he noted that if spirits took the form of humans, others would lower their guard more easily. Flora spotted her brother and father below. Suspended in the air while holding Flora, Libel observed the bond between parent and child, admitting it was something he could never fully grasp. Gustav rushed toward Flora and embraced her tightly. He was overwhelmed with relief, saying that when he heard she had vanished, his world went dark. Flora apologized tearfully. Gustav reassured her. As long as she was safe, nothing else mattered. Libel pointed out how frightened she had been before, yet now it was clear her father was a good man. Flora quietly agreed. Gustav then introduced himself, stating he was Gustav de Niesner, Lord of the Territory. The Spirit King introduced himself in return as Lyburgus, Dragon of the Starsea, kinsman of the goddess Tereris and ruler of spirits. He announced that he had already eliminated the monsters to the west, and their fortress would face no further danger. Gustav was stunned and thanked him for saving their land. Libel responded that the gratitude should not be directed to him. It was Flora who healed him and awakened him from his long slumber. If Gustav wished to thank someone, he should thank his daughter. Gustav explained that the one who went to awaken Lord Liber had been Flora, and wondered if it was because she overheard him and Laius speaking. Flora apologized for eavesdropping. Gustav, however, believed it was their failure for not noticing. He said that being able to use her power for the sake of others was one of her finest qualities. Then he asked the Spirit King for permission to pose a question. Flora tried to stop him, but Liber had no objections. Gustav continued, their ancestors left them a warning, offer a daughter to the dragon. Now that Lord Liber had awakened, he wished to know what the Spirit King intended to do with Flora. Everyone tensed. A sacrifice. The very idea chilled the room. Gustav instinctively moved to shield his daughter. Then Liber roared, he would never devour humankind, the beloved children of the goddess Tereris. The fact that he was seen as some vile, man-eating dragon was infuriating. His voice shook the hall. Everyone froze, stunned by the Spirit King's anger. Flora quickly added that he was telling the truth. If he had truly planned to eat her, she would have been inside his stomach back in the cave. With that, they returned to the castle. Maria muttered that it wasn't very funny. Soon, they sat inside the meeting hall. Gustav finally understood the situation. Flora healed Lord Liber's wounds, and in return, he vowed to protect her. As part of that vow, he eradicated the miasma. Liber confirmed it. He would protect Flora and remain by her side for the rest of her life. He swore that oath because he owed her his life, but truthfully, a great part of it was that he had taken a liking to her. Gustav repeated his words, almost stunned, stay by her side for the rest of her life. Flora leaned in and whispered to Liber that humans say such things when they are getting married. Her father would misunderstand. Liber paused, realizing she was right. Humans had customs like that. He glanced toward the window. Speaking of marriage, he asked if she had someone in mind. Flora explained she had been far too busy fighting monsters, and besides, her engagement had been broken just the other day. Liber fell silent. He then expressed disbelief. She meant someone rejected the blessing of the spirits? What kind of fool would do that? Flora replied that the man was the first prince of the kingdom. Liber's thoughts sharpened. The first prince? An arranged political marriage? If that were the case, there must have been a significant reason behind breaking it. Yet a girl capable of holy magic strong enough to fully heal him. He could not fathom why the kingdom would let her go. He told her she had mentioned the engagement being annulled, and demanded she explain everything. Flora hesitated, lost in deep thought. Then the scene shifted, to the king in his chambers. Back then, a lady quietly remarked that His Highness was such a poor thing. She noted how melancholic he had been since the queen passed away, calling it truly awful. Meanwhile, a young girl lay on her bed, crying. Flora narrated that the mother who loved her was gone. She felt that no one was looking at her anymore, and no one cared about anything except her title as a prince. To her, her father was a man whose heart was stolen by something other than his family. Yet she admitted she was the same way. She decided she would not care about anyone else either. Her life was simply about using others and being used in return. The king introduced Floralia de Neisner to Crawford, declaring her as his fiancée. Her future, her life, everything had been decided by the king. None of it belonged to her, and that was simply how it was. Liber thought it sounded like a dubious matter. Gustav explained that, although it was speculation regarding Flora's recent broken engagement, he was almost certain Marquis Truffers was pulling the strings behind the scenes. Liber understood and wondered if that man truly possessed the power to manipulate kings and entire nations. Flora responded that something still did not add up, and she wondered if she was missing something. Liber then pointed out that she did not seem fazed at all when he first brought up breaking the engagement. Liber asked whether she did not love this Crawford fellow. Flora immediately stated that it was nothing like that. She explained that she believed he had no interest in her, even though she had to support him as his fiancée. She tried many things, yet he always seemed annoyed. Lays assumed Flora was His Highness' older sister or something similar. Maria commented that their dynamic felt like a clumsy younger brother with a reliable older sister. Liber said it was fine as long as Flora was not hurt. Flora insisted she was alright, but admitted that as crown princess, she wanted to help the people, and that was her one regret. Their land was withered in many places, and many people were in need. For some reason, the border territory had been spared so far, but only for now. Liber knew it was likely because it was the place where he had been sleeping. Yet Lays simply expressed hunger. Maria said it was almost time, and Flora wondered what was happening. Maria reminded her that she had promised to prepare a magnificent feast when Flora returned with the Spirit King. Flora felt overjoyed. Maria announced that tonight, everyone would build up their strength to the fullest. That night, the palace glowed beautifully, and many people gathered for the grand feast. A boy thanked Lady Flora, saying her healing magic had saved his life and allowed him to enjoy this meal. Another boy said he had no idea how he could ever repay her. A third boy remarked that Lady Flora's training must have been extraordinary, since a healer like him would have been limited to basic healing, just the tip of a dragon's claw. A man at the gathering asked if Flora had even healed a dragon, the Spirit King, and said that if Lady Flora had saved him, she was like one of them. Flora stood there, mesmerized. Liber complimented Flora, saying she was quite adorable. Flora explained that everyone there was a comrade who had risked their lives together. Liber thought to himself that it was not because he was a Spirit King or because he destroyed monsters that people accepted him. It was because Flora had saved them. He found it fascinating, realizing that the girl he had taken an interest in still had many surprises waiting for him. Flora asked if the dish was makizushi, explaining that it was something passed down through the Neisner family, and wondered if it suited his taste. Liber responded that it had been a long time. Flora then asked if he knew about washoku, saying Haruto once treated her to it. Liber admitted he never imagined he would get to eat such a dish in this era. Just as Flora began to speak of her ancestors, Liber interrupted. telling her that if she had eaten enough, she should return to her room. He believed healing him had been too great a burden. Without warning, Liber lifted her in his arms. People around commented that he certainly had some bold moves. When they arrived at her room, Flora panicked, pleading for him to wait, shocked that he would carry a woman into her room without permission. Liber simply said she looked sleepy, thinking it was the right thing to do. Flora tried to explain that in the human world, there were manners between men and women. Liber paused, processing the idea of men and women, and then promised to be more careful. He gently placed her onto her bed. Suddenly, a cat flew into the room. It addressed Liber, asking if he had summoned him. Flora was startled. It was Mycene. Liber noted that she truly did have a contract with the spirit, explaining that bestowing a name upon a spirit formed a bond, allowing her to summon them from anywhere. Flora happily played with the fluffy cat. Completely distracted, Liber attempted to speak, but seeing the fluff ball before her made it impossible for her to think straight. Liber then reasoned that if Mycene was present, they would not be alone as a man and a woman, so there should be no problem. Mycene asked whether Flora liked his fur, and she blissfully answered that it was wonderful. Flora remarked that it felt so good it was healing her, and if she were surrounded by many Mycenes, she would fall asleep instantly. Mycene asked if she truly wanted to be surrounded. Liber tried to stop him, but it was too late. Dozens of Mycenes appeared, all coming to thank Flora for saving their king. More and more cats filled the room, leaving Flora overwhelmed. She admitted she couldn't think straight and could never win against cats. Surrounded completely, she soon fell asleep. Liber watched and quietly said she should rest. Flora slept deeply, buried in soft cats. Meanwhile, in the kingdom, a kinsman informed the majesty that they were at their limit. The lands had withered, people could no longer make a living, and discontent was growing. He warned that if this continued, the people's anger might turn toward the king. He mentioned hearing cries of lament, believing it to be the wrath of spirits, and begged the majesty to allow them to aid the people. The king calmly replied that there was no need. If the people stayed silent, it would be enough. He stated he had already made his move. When questioned about it, he explained that while the kingdom suffered withered land everywhere, one domain remained completely untouched. The kinsman looked confused. The king declared that the root of all this lay with the Marquis of Neisner's family. He insisted they must atone for their sins. The next day, repairs were underway inside the castle. The cats were helping with reconstruction. One cat reported that there was a crack in the wall below. Laius thanked him, saying they needed more people there. The cat urged everyone to work briskly, and Laius agreed, saying they had to finish quickly. Laius noted that even though the monster threat was gone, it looked like their next trouble would arrive soon. Liber stood by the window, watching. Liber commented that Flora was dressed rather strangely. Flora replied that Marquis Truffaut's army was closing in, and he already knew. She explained that between creating countermeasures, preparing meetings, sending reports to the terrorist church, and reconstructing the ancient defensive magic, she had no time to think about her appearance. Flora admitted she never believed the approaching forces were reinforcements, but she had never expected the sudden decision from the king. His Majesty had now declared the dissolution of House Euthner and ordered Marquis Truffaut to suppress them by force. She wondered aloud what the king could possibly be thinking, announcing something so drastic. Liber clarified he wasn't referring to her clothes, he meant the mountain of books on her head. He said that no matter how busy she was, she didn't have to stack books on herself like that and should be more careful. He removed the books from her head and they fell to the floor. He noted their weight and asked what they were. Flora explained that these were ultra-heavy books, with an ingot and special magic built into the cover. They required both magic and strength to open, so if they were stolen, no one could easily read them. All important documents in the fortress were made this way, and they also served as training. Liber was impressed. Liber remarked that she handled them effortlessly. Flora explained that everyone in her family trained, and it was her late mother's teaching to live strongly. Liber acknowledged it, asking what exactly she meant. At that moment Laius entered, clarifying that Flora meant the books. In earlier times, even tables were made of ingots, though they no longer went that far in this fortress. Flora added that their mother always said real training began only after reaching one's limit. A cat exclaimed nostalgically. Flora said it was a wise saying for both physical and magical strength. Liber wondered internally if her entire family was made up of meatheads. Gustav entered, saying he still didn't approve of her using recovery magic past her limits every time because of that philosophy. Maria added that she would appreciate it if Flora didn't assume everyone around her shared that same muscle-brain mindset. Gustav realized everyone had gathered. Gustav reported that scouts from every region had confirmed the situation. The king's claim. Maria said she couldn't understand at all why they would call Lord Gustav a traitor. Gustav agreed it was absurd. The spirit's wrath withering the kingdom's lands, the king was claiming her father was responsible. Gustav declared that it was ridiculous. Liber explained that the land withered because when he fell asleep, the surface spirits gradually lost their power. It was likely a result of him entering hibernation, weakening his blessing upon the earth. And yet they dared to call it the spirit's wrath. Flora asked if that was what he was upset about. In any case, the king believed Gustav was responsible. He was accusing him of using magic left by their ancestors to curse the entire kingdom. Flora questioned if that was truly what the king thought. Gustav believed the king was twisting facts to suit his own convenience, claiming it was all for the purpose of overthrowing the royal family. Flora remarked that if she had truly taken such a roundabout approach, she would already be on her way to destroy the royal family by now. To her, the entire claim was full of contradictions. Halto added that Flora's engagement had been arranged at the royal family's earnest request. Gustav pointed out that weakening the other nobles with a curse while also making Flora the first prince's fiancée made no sense. If he truly had enough power to curse the entire kingdom, then he and Flora would be a dangerously powerful parent-child duo. Flora quietly muttered that if the king were standing before her, she would strangle him. At that moment, Mr. Fox arrived. Liber noted his return. Mr. Fox reported that the Trefo's army had over 2,000 soldiers and was about a 3-day march away, but a storm had halted their advance. Flora thanked him, realizing time was short. She wondered whether they should take advantage of the terrain and launch a surprise attack, or perhaps prepare a siege defense, though that seemed unrealistic given the numbers. Since the enemy wasn't monsters, negotiation could also be an option. Flora suddenly wondered if this fox was the same one from her dream. Mr. Fox continued, saying that aside from Marquis Trefos, the soldiers' morale seemed low. Flora asked what he meant. Liber explained that what began as a rescue mission had suddenly turned into an attack order, so it was no surprise the army was shaken. Halto added that the troops were likely moving only because it was an order, though that did not mean he planned to hold back. It just made the situation awkward. Liber then declared they must shake off the sparks falling on them and cut the problem at its root. He casually announced he would go erase the royal capital and told the others to wait there, promising to return by breakfast. Halto panicked, calling that a terrible idea. Flora begged him to stop, insisting that such power was far too overwhelming. Flora thought to herself that if survival were their only goal, she could use Dragon's Breath and wipe out Trefos's army, but many of their soldiers were not truly enemies. Suddenly, Mycene leaped into her arms. Liber asked if she was all right, while Mr. Fox grew irritated at the sight of the cat. Flora simply smiled, delighted by the soft fluff. Liber sighed, relieved she seemed fine. Flora suddenly exclaimed that she had figured it out. Meanwhile, in the Marquis camp, soldiers whispered to each other. One wondered what was happening. They had expected to be reinforcements, but now their orders had suddenly become an attack. They questioned whether they were really going to fight the renowned army of the Margrave and raise their swords against the Silver Saint. A guard ordered silence as the Marquis arrived. He announced that they would resume advancing once the rain stopped. He admitted the sudden order had shaken them, but urged them to take heart. Their cause was not to attack the Silver Saintess. Their battle, he claimed, was to rescue the saint who was being manipulated by the traitor Gustav. This, he declared, was a righteous mission to save her. The soldiers were told to steel themselves. After leaving camp, the Marquis revealed his true thoughts. He wished the soldiers would simply obey without question. To him, calling that girl a saint was absurd. He recalled the first time it happened 15 years ago, a poor harvest yet again, unable to meet the tax deadline. The Marquis recalled how the wrath of the spirits, a nightmare, suddenly descended upon the world. One day without warning, the blessings of the forests, grasslands, and fields vanished. Barren land began to spread inexplicably, creeping across the kingdom. It did not spread evenly, and he grew frustrated, wondering why it struck only his domain. Tax revenue plunged, and his standing in the royal court collapsed with it. Rumors grew. People whispered that it must be the wrath of the spirits, angered by selfish and willful nobles. They said his domain was especially awful, and they claimed nothing could be expected from Marquis Trefors. Even nobles sneered that the Marquis of Trefos had surely fallen. They still believed their own lands were better than his. He heard them say that his domain was withering away one step at a time, and he furiously thought that with someone like him in charge, this was inevitable. In anger, he cursed under his breath. He continued remembering how, 5 years ago, the only daughter of the Margrave's family was chosen as the crown prince's fiancée, the prosperous Neissner family, untouched by the spirit's wrath. He scoffed that no matter their rank, they were still countryside bumpkins, and that the girl was even born to a commoner mother. That had been his opinion, and yet, things changed. People began speaking about Flora. Someone mentioned hearing that she had performed healing rites at the Grand Cathedral. They called her a merciful silver saint. Before that, they said she had run a soup kitchen in the capital's slums. She was praised as wonderful, wise, and beloved. In only a moment, that little girl captured the people's hearts and began reforming the court with her brilliance. The same officials who once sighed behind his back were now praising her endlessly. He seethed, unable to tolerate it. Then came the day, 2 years ago. The Marquis remembered someone telling him to lower the tax rate. He thought it foolish. Why should he care if some peasants starved? To him, they were all waste anyway. Shortly after, Crawford visited him. Crawford appeared to be in pain, and the Marquis asked who he was facing. Was this truly His Highness? The Marquis noticed a strange aura around him and questioned why the prince had come. What business could he possibly have here? Crawford calmly stated that he had heard the Marquis's lands had been ravaged by the spirit's wrath, and even though the king had prepared no relief, he himself would extend a helping hand. The Marquis was stunned. This was not the weak prince he once knew. He wondered who this man truly was. Crawford then asked if he did not desire the Margraviate of Neuthner. Time shifted to the present camp, where a soldier approached the Marquis, reporting on the current situation. The Marquis insisted it was nothing and told the soldier to continue. The soldier informed him that the thunderstorm had passed, and they were ready to resume advancing as soon as preparations were complete. The weather had barely slowed their route. The Marquis believed that monsters would soon appear in that area. He held firm to the belief that, just as Crawford predicted 2 years later, the Margraviate of Neuthner would suffer a devastating blow from a horde of monsters emerging from the western mountain range. The order was clear: strike them there. The Marquis suddenly snapped, declaring it enough. He admitted to himself that he had only half believed it back then, but seeing the monsters move exactly as predicted, he now knew. All that remained was to crush the weakened Margrave's house. With a twisted grin, he began to laugh. The army prepared to advance. One soldier admitted he was not feeling good about this mission. Another warned him that if the Marquis heard such a comment, he would be in trouble, and just as he spoke, he noticed the sky suddenly darken. A massive dragon appeared before them. Panic erupted. Soldiers fled, shouting that it was a dragon. Then came the sound of heavy footsteps. A massive horde of monsters was approaching. But as the dust settled, it turned out to be cats. Countless cats charging toward them. The army encountered the swarm of cats, and chaos followed. Meanwhile, Liber returned to the palace. He silently wondered what exactly he was supposed to say about what had just happened. He could hardly believe Flora had ended the battle with such a tactic. Flora explained that the idea struck her after experiencing Miss Mykene's fur, insisting that fluffiness would save the world. Liber stated he had heard humans possessed a weakness for creatures like that, but he never imagined it would be to such a degree. Flora casually pointed out that dragons were cute too, something he surely already knew. She clarified the strategy. The enemy's morale had not been high to begin with, so instead of fighting, she simply needed to remove their will to battle entirely. As they passed by the prison, a prisoner was already overwhelmed by softness. He marveled at the wonderfully soft fur, feeling sleepy and calling it heaven sent by Lady Terraris. The cat spirits had completely calmed him, and he declared fighting pointless. He stated that anyone who defied Lady Flora would be sentenced to a fluffing. Flora noted that he had been completely defanged. Liber admitted he never imagined the cat spirit could be used in such a way, but all humans were beloved children of the goddess Terraris, and it was fortunate that no one had been hurt. He even wondered aloud if Flora might be more suited to be the Spirit King. Flora blushed, thanking him for the compliment. She insisted the success was thanks to Liber and Mykene for gathering the cat spirits. She added that it was also helpful that her brother's detached unit captured every fleeing soldier. She claimed all she did was think of a small plan. Speaking of Mykene, she mentioned hearing that Mykene could now summon cats from another world as spirits. She marveled at the power of spirits. Liber responded that it was rare for a spirit's power to grow so suddenly. He remarked it was unheard of for so many cat spirits to gather. Flora asked if that was true. Liber explained he had only attempted to summon less than half that number. The rest had come on their own, drawn to her. It seemed she had an unusually strong affinity with spirits, far greater than he ever expected. Soon, the Marquis was captured and tied up. The cats surrounded him in mock interrogation, telling him to answer Lady Flora's question. They hinted that if he cooperated, perhaps he would earn a reward, though only perhaps. If he refused, they implied consequences. They called it a peaceful interrogation. The Marquis quickly agreed to speak, asking only to be allowed to pet the fur. Liber noted that the Marquis was weak-willed as well. Flora wondered whether His Highness would really allow such behavior. The Marquis told her she could believe what she wished. He continued, admitting she might be celebrated as a silver saint, but insisted His Highness also drew people in, though in a different way. He claimed her devoted admirers worshipped her as the Golden Devil, a title she now apparently held. Liber commented that humans in this country enjoyed giving nicknames. Flora mentioned that her own mother had once been called the Azure Sword Princess. She then questioned whether the Marquis had been so influenced by such words that he attempted to attack her territory. He retorted that she was only a little girl who had everything handed to her without hardship or struggle. The Marquis insisted Flora knew nothing about him. He claimed she should try living as he had, watching her lands wither, losing her fortune, losing the trust of fellow nobles, and enduring it all in isolation. If she experienced that, he said she would have done the same things he did. Even if His Highness were a demon or something else entirely, he argued it was obvious she would still have taken his hand. Maria warned him to stop speaking as if he understood Flora. But Flora calmly said it was all right. She admitted she had been blessed and would not deny it. She added that she would never become like him, but regardless of circumstances, she would live her life with her late mother's words in her heart. She stated that, even if no one asked it of her, she would be someone who does what must be done for the sake of others, because that, she believed, was what a true noble should be. The Marquis scoffed, dismissing her stance as pretty words. Liber intervened, telling him that was enough. Mr. Fox approached the Marquis as Liber continued. If Flora were merely lucky, Liber explained, she would not be where she was now. In the human world, daily actions accumulate and eventually return to oneself. He stated that the Marquis was only facing the consequences of the filth he had spread. Flora reflected on Marquis Trifos. She recalled hearing nothing good about him for some time. She had heard he openly boasted about treating his people as disposable. Liber acknowledged that he felt some sympathy for the Marquis, but said the resentment aimed at Flora and the Nasoner domain was misplaced. To him, it was clear the Marquis had no understanding of what everyone here had done for their people. Flora then revealed that the mastermind behind everything was her former fiancé. She questioned by what means he manipulated the king into issuing such a declaration. In that moment she realized His Highness must be manipulating His Majesty, yet she could not imagine how. The group fell silent in surprise. Gustav reminded them that they were still only speculating. Flora then said she would rather rely on Liber and head to the royal capital to question them directly, though she accidentally pictured His Majesty being killed by the dragon, which startled everyone. Maria and Liber immediately objected, horrified by the thought. Meanwhile, Crawford remarked that since people called him useless, his house had decided to declare independence. In this scene, the Spirit King had transformed into a dragon, and Flora was amazed. She thought it was incredible that he could fly such a distance in under an hour. Liber mentioned that he had created a barrier around them, so they would not be affected by the weather or wind pressure. Hearing that, Flora was grateful, thinking that without it they would have been flattened like pancakes. Maria and Halto had assured her that they would take care of the home front. Flora felt relieved, believing it was a great help that Maria and her brother were protecting their territory while they were away. Still, she never imagined they would actually end up storming the royal capital. Liber commented that doing so would probably be faster. Flora admitted that might be true, but she feared the Nasoner territory might be affected again because of it. Gustav reassured her not to worry, adding that if it came to that, they would simply abandon the king and declare their domain's independence. Liber noted that his dragon's breath was roaring. Flora wondered if he was planning a rebellion, worrying he might even blow away the people of the capital. Liber teased that he was only joking. Suddenly, Flora spotted dark clouds and wondered if that could be. It was miasma. Gustav was stunned, thinking it should have been impossible. Liber explained that the capital was overflowing with monsters. Flora asked if he could see them. He confirmed, stating that the creatures were continuously being born from the miasma and attacking people, and there were quite a lot of them. Flora panicked, thinking it was terrible. Until now, they had only appeared near the borders. She feared the destruction this would bring to the heart of the city. Flames and chaos consumed the capital below. Meanwhile, Crawford stood on his balcony. 5 years earlier, Flora had politely asked His Highness to excuse her intrusion as she brought freshly baked sweets. She told him that people say one gets sick without eating vegetables, and everyone was lamenting about him refusing to eat his greens. Crawford coldly told her to leave and not interfere with him. Shocked, she replied that she would just leave the carrot cake there for him and hoped he would eat it later. He muttered that he would never touch it. Crawford had found her unbearably persistent every day and wondered if this was harassment. His father insisted she was his fiancée, yet she came daily, meddling where she wasn't wanted. Flora would ask if he planned to go outside and mention she brought an ancient text they should read together in the sun. No matter how cold Crawford behaved, it had no effect. He wanted nothing to do with anyone, yet she continued to show up. Another day she suddenly opened the curtains, reminding him he had an important engagement and urging him to wake up. He angrily ordered her not to barge into his room. Flora simply explained that the maid had let her in. Crawford declared he would fire that maid, and she pointed out that he was always trying to fire people. She waited outside his room anyway. Despite finding her annoying to the core, Crawford began to notice something strange. Ever since she started coming, he felt healthier against his will. Flora later mentioned that his ceremonial speech was still blank and offered to write it if needed. She wondered why he troubled her so much, especially after firing his secretary. Since he had interference with his duties, she said she would temporarily act in the secretary's place until he found a new one. Crawford just wanted her out of his affairs, yet to her, he remained. She was cut off when she tripped, her foot getting stuck. She nearly fell, but Crawford caught her, worry flickering in his behavior as he told her to go home early that day. He insisted there was no reason, but secretly admitted to himself that he did not entirely dislike the idea of talking to her. He later walked through the underground archives, noting it had been a long time. He recalled that ancient documents were stored there and remembered how she used to bring him many old texts. She must have had a fondness for such books. It was freezing there back then, and he realized. In the present, Crawford now stood opposite the dragon. He stated that the dragon had come. Meanwhile, Flora cried out as she pointed toward a single untouched area in the city where the miasma did not reach. Gustav recognized it as the cathedral. Liber agreed and announced that they would descend there. They landed at the main doors. A voice greeted them, noting that everyone had arrived and that they had been expecting her. As they arrived at the church, the man inside greeted them, addressing Flora and Lord Gustav. He remarked that it had been some time and questioned why they had gone and awakened the Great Spirit King for them, offering his sincerest gratitude. This man was Archbishop Hughes of the Terrarist Church. Flora asked if he truly knew Lord Liber. Hughes responded that of course he did. Lord Liber was the one who stood at the pinnacle of all spirits. Flora appeared confused by his phrasing. Liber then clarified that this man's true name was Yggdrass. Liber explained that Yggdrass was a high-ranking tree spirit who had always preferred living among humans, though he never expected he would become a bishop. Yggdrass noted he had faced his own share of difficulties, pausing thoughtfully. He then stated that there was much to discuss, but first they needed to address the current situation. Flora wondered aloud if the cathedral remained untouched thanks to his power. Yggdrass thanked Lord Liber for awakening. As a result, he too was regaining his spiritual strength. He admitted he did not know the cause of the miasma, but believed that maintaining a barrier of this level should be possible. Flora suggested that if they could get the cat spirits to guide everyone in the city there, they could bring the people to safety. Gustav volunteered to go. Flora quickly interrupted, saying she would go as well, but Gustav insisted she had something else she was meant to do. Flora repeated his words in confusion, unsure of his meaning. Liber and Flora then proceeded deeper into the church. Flora suddenly flinched and questioned what she had just heard. Yggdrass explained that it seemed the monsters were striking the barrier. Liber was irritated, saying it was troublesome, while noting that the miasma was growing stronger with each moment. Yggdrass warned that at this rate, it was only a matter of time before the barrier fell. He then informed Lady Florelia that there was something he wished to give her. Meanwhile, chaos filled the city. A boy shouted for everyone to follow him as they attempted to act as a decoy. He urged the others to run. A cat spirit army rushed to rescue the people. Confused, the boy asked who they were. A cat spirit responded that they were with Lady Flora and explained that he served the fairy king. The boy reacted with disbelief. Lady Flora? He asked if they were companions of the saintess. The cat answered that they were slaying monsters at Lady Flora's request. Hearing this, a man proclaimed that the saintess was leading them with her power. Then they could not simply continue running. Adventurers stepped forward, declaring they would fight as well. A woman prayed desperately to Lady Terraris and Lady Floralia as a massive monster attacked civilians. Just then, Gustav arrived in the city to confront the threat. Back in the church, Yggdrass presented something to Flora. She stared in shock, asking what it was. Yggdrasil revealed that it was a holy staff born from the divine tree of the goddess Tereris. He explained that it possessed the power to illuminate darkness and purge miasma, and that normally no human could wield it. Liber commented that he believed Flora might be capable of doing so, and Yggdrasil agreed. Yggdrasil remarked that if a human existed who directly received Lord Liber's divine protection, such a rare being, then perhaps it was possible. Liber reassured Flora not to worry. If the holy staff rejected her, then he would simply break it himself. Flora thought the idea sounded far too sacrilegious. She then took hold of the holy staff. Liber observed that there seemed to be no issue. He kissed the back of her hand, declaring that her words would be his words, and her actions would be his actions. He recognized her under his crest, acknowledging her as the proxy of the Spirit King. Suddenly, the staff began to glow. Flora questioned what was happening. Liber explained that he had merely entrusted his royal authority to her for the time being. His protection alone was likely insufficient to unlock the staff's true power. Yggdrasil elaborated that this was the nature of a divine instrument, a creation of the goddess. As Liber had said, even so, Lady Florelia's magic and the holy staff appeared to be exceptionally compatible. There had been no guarantee the staff would respond at all, let alone blossom with power. Flora felt her magic flowing outward, being drawn into the holy staff.